things.
A lot of things going on today.
Yeah. All right. We will now have history of the program by Mr. Paul Miles.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. And first of all, it gives me great honor to just stand here in the great city of Dale, Georgia, and be able to kind of give what they call the history. But I talked with, we call him Billy Joe. I talked with Billy Joe last night, and I told Billy Joe, I said, you know, I'm a few years older than what I was maybe 30 years ago. And I say, at the time, I say, you cannot write history. You can't write history. History writes itself. Okay? So, and at the time the history was being written, I didn't have a notepad at that time to take notes. So some of the things that I read in here, it may sound as if it's contradiction, or maybe what Alan Lane just said, or something like that. But it's not that it's contradicting what Alan Lane said. It's just the way that we remember it as it happened back long and then. So y'all bear with me. I'm going to do some reading here. I don't know if I'm going to read everything I have here because sometimes I'm going to stop and it may be things that you may would like to add, but everybody is not here, probably some of the names that I may call. But nevertheless, I think Billy Joe mentioned about that we had a desire that this tent could be full here. But let me tell you something. Most of the time when anything is initially started, it's only just a handful. It's just a handful.
That's right.
That usually started. But I guarantee you that if we can stay together and make this happen again another year, that we have big dreams for what you see. This is just a shadow of things to come.
Right.
Okay, now, as far as league history, not only did it bring fun and joy, but it inspired and motivated others' community. Oh, see, that's just how. Okay, let me start here right. Okay. To our distinguished guests, friends, and especially to all the old timers, 30 years ago, we never thought this day we would see. Yes, I'm 30, but 60 plus and cruising. I still love baseball, but I just can't play the game anymore. And most of you who probably know me real well, you probably saying, well, Paul, you never played that much. And you're right. But guess what? We're all on the sideline now, remembering the past. That's why we're here today, to celebrate the history of what we consider was the joy of our lives that we wrote some years ago. The reunion committee gave me the task of writing or maybe giving the history for this occasion. But as I picked up my pen and paper and began to write, I realized that history writes itself. Not making excuses, but I wasn't taking notes at the time this history was being written. So all I have is a brief script of what happened 30 or 40 years ago in community neighborhood baseball and softball. Was the neighborhood family game. From there arose some with the idea. From that time, it arose some with the idea of organizing baseball. All it took was just one pitch, and the league was off and running under the direction of the late Mr. Jim Bell of Adel, Georgia. Under his direction, teams united and began to play organized baseball, what soon became known as the South Georgia and North Florida Baseball League, with Mr. Jim Bell serving as president of the league. The original teams were Vienna Mets, which later became the Valdosta Mets, Adel Astros, Tifton, Lennox, and Ashburn County Braves. From these 5 teams' performance, the league began to grow. Competition was very strong. Adel became the heart of leagues, playoff, and championship games. In years to come, teams from Spa, Clydeville, Lake Park, Jasper, and Jennings, Florida, joined the league. The league certainly brought fun and joy to all neighborhoods and communities that had teams represented in them. Not only did it bring fun and joy, but it inspired and motivated other community and businessmen to get involved. By the time of the early 70s, teams in the eastern part of Lyons County were beginning to organize and play league baseball. From there grew the Jackie Robinson Baseball League, which later became the Bicentennial Baseball League, with Mr. Don Carter serving as league president. The league began play with just 4 teams in the summer of 1972. The teams were, at that time, the Beamer Hawks, the Little Vienna Mets, with both teams combining to become the Cherry Creek Indians, Naylor Braves, and the Lakeland Pirates. Certainly, this was the beginning of local big league ball in South Georgia. Let me pause there for a minute and do I was involved directly with that Jackie Robinson Baseball League. And just as I was talking with Mr. J.C. Riley and Mr. Don Carter, son Ron there, and his brother, Mr. Ernest Carter there, I can remember in 1972 that we sit on Mr. Bud Carter porch, and it was on Memorial Day. We had come down to play Naylor. At that time, Mr. Bud Carter practically run everything down here at that end of the woods. So due to us playing by his rules and regulations, we're not going to tell you the outcome of that. But nevertheless, it was that great event there that began why we are here today somewhat. Now, I talked about the South Georgia and North Florida Baseball League. At that time, we as Beavers, Hawks, and Naylor Braves, and the young Naylor Braves, because Mr. Bud had a team in the 40s, I guess. But nevertheless, this was a new group of young Naylor Braves under the direction of Mr. Allen Lane. So we kind of organized that day sitting on their porch there in early summer of 1972. And I was telling Terry Carter that it was 1973, but then he looked in the book, he told me, he said, no, I think it was 1971, because in the record book there, it states that we had our next meeting in October of 1972. So that means that I guess the event that I'm talking about when we played ball and organized could have took place in 1971, or even much as early as 1970. So I say all that to say this. Some of you have in your mind some things that happened in the past. You have some history, probably that I'm going to miss out on. When this event is over, please get with me. If you look on back of the program there, we have an email address there on the very back page there that you can send pictures or records or anything, because in the years to come, we need to put together a more sufficient history that we will be able to not only look back on, but we can hand this down from generation to generation. Because let me tell you something. When you look at the big leagues today, the big leagues just didn't start as the American and National League. It began somewhere years ago, maybe in a camp pastor, or maybe in somebody's backyard. Right. So let's keep up with this history here. Right. Let me continue to read. Under Mr. Don Carter as president, the league grew quickly. In 1972, the expansion teams came. They were the Naylor Dodgers, Pearson Athletics, Lakeland Bulldogs, Standard Container, which later became known as the Humbleville Sluggers, the Madison Hornets. Some of the greatest times were yet to come. Lady softball began playing in the city of Valdosta and surrounding cities, but not in the county. What it was worth at that time, no one ever considered the ladies playing a game of softball after men finished their baseball game. To win and wonder, you never can tell. It happened. Most baseball teams had a lady softball team in a matter of time. Some of those teams were Peyton, Vets, which later became known as the Harrington All-Stars, West Street Inn, Parkwood, Cherry Creek, Homerville, Adel, and Clydeville. Competition was very stiff. So stiff, some of the latest teams later joined the Valdosta Women's Softball League, which was sponsored by Valdosta Parks and Recreation, where the great softball teams were. You had, I'll never forget, Wallet was always tough. First State Bank, Fresh National, Tri-State, Strational Construction Company. You had so many lady softball teams. There was very little room for play of baseball, but we survived with the involvement of the late Mr. Willie Cut Edwards, and I believe that Mr. Larry Hampson. How did I see Larry right there? Yeah, I think I met Larry down here in Dale on Lake Lamore, 30 years ago at least.
About 10 or 15 years.
but nevertheless, with the involvement of the late Mr. Cut Edwards, and I believe Mr. Larry Hampson worked with Mr. Edwards on bringing the Bo Brinson baseball tournament to Scott Park, Pendleton Park. The year was 1976. I believe, Larry, about 1976. Both men worked so diligently to make this a success. Valdosta became as the place to be on Labor Day weekend. You could see local baseball at its very best. Some teams that played in the Bo Brinson tournament were Valdosta Trojans, Valdosta Giants, Waycross Bulldogs, Allenhurst Blue Devils, Savannah, Cherry Creek Indians, Madison Hornet, and there were other teams also. So in other words, we are here today to celebrate a great occasion. I didn't give the history going back to the 50s and the early 60s, but just as I said, it was some teams that played ball at that time in backyards. Didn't have a ballpark to play in. Or they played on school grounds at that time. I can remember there was a small war problem, and I think I said Sheriff Park, Mr. Ashley Park, but nevertheless, it was 4 teams at that time. Most of played ball back and forth. You had Varna Mets, Naylor Braves under the direction of Mr. Bud Carter at that time, and you had maybe Mount Zion. It was one other team. It was 4 teams. It was 4 teams. But I know you had Naylor, you had Varna, and you had Mount Zion. And I think at that time that it was very few white people at that time came and played ball with the black teams at that time. Y'all, this is history. But let me tell you something. By some reason,